Okay, I'm gonna start with your name. And would you like to tell something about yourself before we start getting into some deep conversation?
Sure. My name is Alex. I work in the spirits industry and wine and spirits. So I deal with whiskey and wine and all kinds of things for a living, and which is why I don't drive and take Ubers all the time.
No kidding. You don't drive at all.
I do drive. I do have a car, but not if I'm going out to bars and restaurants, which is what I do for a living, because I'm usually expected to have maybe a glass of wine. And any listeners to the podcast, I thoroughly encourage you to do the same. Please drink responsibly, everyone.
yes, of course. I don't have much of yours right now, but down the road, of course, you're gonna have. Today's my 4th day doing this thing.
Oh, cool.
And
I'm honored to be on the early side of
Thank
stuff.
you for saying yes and agreeing to doing this thing. Honestly, I'm very grateful to that. And speaking of, you say wine and you say whiskey.
Yeah, wine, whiskey. I represent a number of different wine and spirits brands here in Chicago.
Oh, nice. So, like, do you try different kind of wines and whiskeys and stuff, and you report to the company, or what is your job description, if you don't mind me asking?
Sure.
Like
so I am what's called a portfolio specialist, which means that I represent 25 different wine and spirits brands here in Chicago, among a number of other people on my team who are all really fantastic at what they do. So it's my job to know everything I can about all of the brands that I represent, and I will bring those to different bars and restaurants, and I will talk to whoever's in charge of the beverage program, and then we get to taste wine. I get to see if we can, if they want to bring in the particular wines and spirits. I always say to people, it sounds like I work in sales, but I technically don't. I work in education. I can't legally sell you anything.
Okay.
So that's.
But in short, you suggest them that this is something that you should put it in your.
That's correct.
Right?
Yeah, I make strong suggestions. Is what it boils down to.
That must be great.
Yeah.
So, what do you think the good wine? Because me and my friends like to go wine tasting. And whiskey, I haven't tried it yet.
Not a big fan? That's okay. Or I haven't tried it.
I haven't tried it yet. So wine would be the thing. I'm recently trying beers around not the town, but wherever I go, I try to drink different kind of beers and see how the things are.
Well, there's a lot of great beer here in Chicago. A lot of lovely local microbreweries and craft breweries. So there's a lot of good stuff to try. With wine, I hate to give what might sound like a slightly deferential answer.
Oh,
no. The best wine is whatever you're enjoying in the moment, right? Everyone's got their taste, everyone's got their style.
Yes.
Personally speaking, I'm a big rosé fan. I adore rosé. I love white wine. I'm a big fan of New Zealand Sauvignon Blancs in general.
Mm-hmm.
If I won't name names on your podcast because I don't want to get you in trouble for
nothing
advertising or something like that.
Nothing will happen.
But I am very much a white wine drinker myself.
White wine drinker.
And there's just so and really it's wine. Wine is a very fun and interesting world, and it's all about exploration. It's about you discovering, for example, I've very recently gotten into Portuguese wine.
Okay.
And what you'll come to find is that every country has their own nuance when it comes to their wine. They have their own set of rules. So some people are diehard French wine drinkers, Spanish wine, German wine. I love Austrian wine. There's an Austrian grape called Grüne Veltliner, and it was originally described to me as the most versatile white wine out there. It can go with any meal kind of thing, right? And I'm obsessed with it now.
I gotta try that. You said it's Austrian wine, right?
Austrian, yes.
Perfect.
Yes. And you always know it's real Austrian wine because Austria always puts that red and white flag, their flag, on the cap of the bottles.
Yeah.
So if you're at your local liquor store and you're looking for an Austrian wine, they will always have that little red and white flag on top of it. So you know you've got the real deal when you find it.
It would be fun. I see you have quite a lot of experience in wine. Okay, I have some questions about wine since you are expert. I would say, is it white wine sweeter than red wine, or is it very similar? Sweetness depends on what kind of flavor they use.
What I always like to say to people is that, first of all, when you're talking about wine tasting notes, wine and spirits in general, sweet tends to be a pitfall. Sweet is a word that a lot of us tend to avoid when we're talking about wine in general. Why? Because sweet has so many different connotations. So I always try to tell people when we're talking about wine, is that wine, is it a fruit characteristic you're tasting? Because fruit is sweet. Is it a fruity wine? Is it a candy flavor? Are you getting flavors of caramel or chocolate, things like that? That is all different types of sweet. So I always try to steer people away from that word sweet. Now, that being said, white wines tend to, and this is a very broad generalization, white wines tend to have more residual sugar in them than red wines. That is just a totally blanket statement for like the mass production market. There are some phenomenal, high acidic, very mineral forward white wines out there. That's actually my preference for white wines. So I always try to, and it's the same with rosé, where I try to steer people away from thinking of them as sweeter than red wine. There are also dessert red wines out there that have a huge amount of residual sugar in there, right? Well, I'm being dramatic. A huge amount is compared to say like soda. It's
no.
I'm like I said, being dramatic. So it really depends on the grape, it depends on the producer, and it depends on the style they're going for. Wine is deliberate. That's one of the things I love about it and I've always respected about it, is that people make wine on purpose. They don't just throw some grapes into a fermentation tank and see what happens, right? They make wine on purpose. So again, just to circle back, is white wine typically sweeter than red? Maybe statistically speaking, but I always say that there are so many wonderful dry wines out there.
Dry.
Yes.
Dry.
Dry versus sweet. Those are the phrases used in the wine world to describe. A drier wine is one with less of that residual sugar.
Okay, so dry means more of a bitterness, and sweet is, of course, sweet.
Sure.
Am I getting that right?
That's totally fine. Well, and again, to separate things too, bitter in and of itself is its own quality, of course. So you can talk about bitterness in wine, but usually that dryness factor involves that bitterness you're talking about, but also acidity. That's a really important thing to think about in wine, particularly if you're looking at, say, champagne. Champagne is super acidic, very high acidity in general. So,
question, now I'm confused between champagne and wine. Is champagne another part or high-end part of the wine which is carbonated?
That's a fantastic question. So most importantly to recognize, champagne is part of the category of sparkling wine, right? So as you said, there are many wines out there that are carbonated, that have some sort of carbonation in there. Champagne in and of itself is a region. So Champagne is a French wine necessarily from the Champagne region of France. That incorporates a frankly very small chunk of land in France with a lot of really stunning, incredible brands and beautiful wines that come out of it. France, when it comes to, a few minutes ago when I was talking about how every country has kind of their own rules and how they break things down, France in particular is very set on its regions, right? So you'll hear these terms like, let's say, a Bordeaux or a Champagne. Those are two different regions. Those are totally different places in France. If you hear about a Beaujolais, that's a specific grape. It's a Gamay grape. It's a type of wine from one little region called Beaujolais, right?
Yes.
So Champagne is all sparkling white wine that comes from the Champagne region of France.
Champagne region. So Champagne is generally like a place.
Yes.
And that's how the champagne came. Oh.
Yes, exactly. And now there are many different styles of champagne out there. They fairly universally use the same three grapes. But that being said, there are experiments always that happen. There are plenty of other sparkling wines in the world. There are lovely American sparklings and sparkling wines from Argentina and Australia and New Zealand. Everywhere in the world has the ability to produce sparkling wine. You hear about things like Prosecco and Cava. Those are other styles of sparkling wine from different parts of the world. But Champagne is specific to one region.
Champagne is pretty fun. Another question I had was, I assume you, I don't want to assume actually, how long have you been tasting wine and spirits?
Another great question. So I will fully admit, in the grand scheme of things, I'm a fair newcomer to the wine world. So I came into the wine and spirits industry. I was a bartender and a mixologist. I ran a couple of beverage programs here in Chicago. I ran a couple of bars over the years, and eventually decided that I was sick of staying up till 4 a.m. And
that's the one thing.
It's the hardest part about being a bartender, and this is why I always tell everyone: tip your bartenders. Always tip your bartenders. They're on their feet for a very long time. So I saw a number of friends and colleagues of mine who worked in the wine and spirit, the brand advocacy and education side of things, and I really liked and admired what they were doing. And decided that's for me. I'm going to try to apply for some jobs. I got very lucky, got some very cool jobs. So I originally started with actually a sparkling water company. I was working for a mixer company instead of a wine or spirit, and that eventually led me to the job that I have now. So to circle back to your original question, I have been in the spirits industry for a decade or so now, and I've only really been doing the wine thing for probably professionally. In my job, I'm just about a year in this particular job. I had some experience with wine, of course, when I was a beverage director and running bar programs, but not as intensive as I have been for the last year of my life.
I'm not gonna lie, you have a significant amount of knowledge in you about the wine. You know, many people don't know about the things you just said, and it would be very informational for people, you know, to listen to this and hear about wines, because I'm sure there are many people who like to drink wine, and of course they would like to know what they are getting into, what they are drinking, and would be better for them to understand what they are putting in their body.
Absolutely.
You know?
And there's a lot of mystery in the wine world too. There's a lot of misinformation out there. I very much admire one of my colleagues. She's she's an actual master sommelier, so like the highest level of accreditation you can get as a somm. That's someone who knows just everything. My knowledge pales in comparison to what she can do. And one of her goals, as she's often frankly said to me, is to demystify wine for people. And it's exactly what you're talking about, where sometimes wine is not as approachable. I mean, even take whiskey, take single malt scotch. That's not a particularly approachable category either. But there's a lot of incredible stuff out there, and so that's why I love doing what I do for a living, is because it's my job to educate, and that's what I want to do. And I love conversations just like this, where I get to say to people, hey, this is what, at least the little that I know about wine, I can impart that on you, and you can take that and run off to your local liquor store and do with it what you will.
Yeah, no, of course. Another question I had, a last quick one, since you said you've been into this spirit industry for a decade or so, how much does it affected your health?
Oh, a lot. Oh, let's be real about that. That's a great question, and let's clarify. Once again, I started this by saying, please, everyone out there, drink responsibly.
Yes.
It's a lot, and that's a conversation that happens a lot between us in this industry, those of us that actually professionally work. I have a lot of people that say to me, wow, it sounds like you just get to go out and drink high-end booze for a living. How cool is that? I'm like, well, it's cool until you don't want to drink.
Yes.
Like, there are days where you wake up and I'm like, you know, I don't want to go drink whiskey today, but apparently I have to.
You have to.
You know, there's a give and take there.
Okay. It was a very nice talking to you,
Thanks
Alex.
for chatting,
and
this is great.
Thank you so much. It was very pleasure to having you, and we're gonna cut it short and see you some other time.
Sounds good, my guy. Best of luck with the podcast.
Thank you.